Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at some different forms that lines and linear equations can be written in. The first of which is slope-intercept form. So this is probably the most common form when we're graphing. It is definitely not the most common form when we're looking at those real-life examples and those word problems, but we'll get to those in just a little bit. So first we want to look at the slope-intercept form, and I'm going to use different colors, and it's up to you if you want to do the same thing. You don't have to, but it just makes it a little bit easier for me to keep track of. So slope-intercept form is y equals, and then I've got m, and we talked about what that m is, whoops, before in our last video, x plus b. So here's just our general form of a line in our slope-intercept form. So like we said before, m is the slope, come on, purple, and b is my y-intercept. So an intercept is where it crosses that line, right? So here I'm looking at the y-axis, and remember that the y-axis goes up and down. So this is telling me where does my line cross that axis. Okay, so that's going to be the y-intercept. So now I can write the equation when I'm given these things, the slope and the intercept. So here I see I've got my intercept and I've got my slope. So sometimes, whoops, you'll have to actually find the slope first. So if you're struggling with that, look back at that last video that I made and we'll look at how to find some slope. So now I can just write my equation. So I've got y equals m, which is my slope, x plus b, which in this case is a -1. So I've got 2x minus 1. So I can do the same thing with any of these examples. So here my slope is -3, so y equals -3x plus 2. I've got my slope and I've got my y-intercept. And it's easy to remember that it goes in that order because it is the slope-intercept form. Okay, so let's look. So we can do that when we're given that information in words, the slope and the intercept, but we can also do that if I'm given a graph. Okay, so first I want to find those things. So first let's look at the slope. And remember from the graph, to find the slope, I find those 2 points. I find the rise, 1, 2, 3, and I find the run, which was 1. So my slope here would be 3. I can also find the y-intercept. I can look and see where the heck does this line cross that y-axis, and it crosses right here, which would be at a -1, 2, 3, 4. Well, so now that I have the slope and the intercept, I can go ahead and write my equation. So y equals 3x minus 4. Okay, so let's do one more like that. So here I see I've got 2 points on my graph. So I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So this can be simplified because both of those can be divided by 2 to -3/2. I see my intercept is right here. It's where it crosses that axis at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got y equals -3/2 x plus 7. So now I have those two equations written. So now you've got a couple more examples to try with the graphing of it. Okay, so that is our slope-intercept form. It's definitely the easiest way to graph some equations, and we'll look at that in our next lesson. Today we're just looking at the general forms of these equations. Okay. The other form that we really actually use quite a bit when we're talking those real-life word problem examples is our standard form. Where I need to be. So our standard form is going to be ax plus by equals c. Okay, so you'll see now instead of having y all by itself, I've got that constant, and this c value is our constant, the thing that doesn't have a variable. That's a constant. Okay, so now I've got my x and my y to one side, and my c, that thing without any other variables, all by itself. Okay, so you can go back and forth between these two different forms of equations. Like it says, you can rewrite this type of equation or this form of an equation into slope-intercept to make it easier to graph just by solving for y. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So first, we're going to be writing each equation in slope-intercept form. And then it's easy to find the slope and the intercept. So when I am solving for y, here's that y value. So to undo the things that are being done to it, right, that's what my goal is when I'm solving, is I'm going to subtract that 2x from both sides. So now I've got y equals, I know that when I'm writing these like as a line and in slope-intercept form, I want my x thing first. And it had a -2 with it from up here. So I've got -2x plus 3. So now from here I can easily see that my slope is a -2 and my y-intercept is a +3. Okay, so now let's look at this next one, which is a little bit more complicated. So I see I've got my y values still. So I want to get it all by itself. So I need to subtract this 4x first. So when we're doing this, you want to think of 4x as a thing that's together and you don't want to separate them. Okay, so now I've got 5y equals -4x minus 30. Well, now to get y by itself, I have to divide this by 5, I have to divide this by 5, and I have to divide this by 5. This step right here is probably the most common place where mistakes are made, because when you divide one thing by 5 or one thing by some value, you have to divide every single piece by that, not just the side. So that's really where I want you to think, like what I do to one thing, I have to do to all things. So now that got rid of my 5 over here, so now I'm left with y equals, this fraction cannot be simplified, this -4/5, so I'm going to leave it that way, -4/5 x, -30 divided by 5 is a -6. So again, I have my slope of a -4/5 and my y-intercept of that -6. So now that I've gotten that y value by itself, I can go ahead and find the slope and the intercept, and I could graph them pretty easily from here, which we'll do in our next lesson. Okay, so sometimes you're also given these graphs. So what we can do is there's a couple of different things that we can actually look at. Is we can find our slope and our y-intercept, because that's what we can do really quickly and easily from a graph, right? So from here, I see that here's my x-axis and here's my y-axis. So I see my intercept, or my b value, was at -2. And I see that my slope, let me do this, point, is up 1/3. So my slope is a +1/3. Well, this is not all that helpful in these standard form kind of equations. So the first thing I have to do is convert these to slope-intercept form. So in order to do that, I would subtract x from this first one. I'm just going to look at a first. So I subtract x, so I've got 3y equals -x minus 6, and divide by everything by 3. So now I've got y equals a -1/3x minus 2. Well, that's really close to what I had, except my slope here is positive and my slope in this equation is negative, so I know it's not going to be a. So let's look at b. So first I want to subtract that x, so I've got y, -3y equals -x plus 6. Divide by -3, so y equals 1/3 x minus 2. Oh, hey, that looks just like this information I had. I had a positive slope of 1/3 and a y-intercept of -2, so I know that that's going to be b. In a couple of lessons, you'll learn an easier way to do these to match our standard form to our graph. But for right now, we really need to get good at converting between standard form to slope-intercept form. So now there's some more examples for you to work through. There's several examples, really. So I'm going to post these answers for you. So once you've worked through these examples and checked and made sure that you are on the right track, then you're going to go ahead and work on that homework and really dig into that practice. Thanks, guys.